everybody. Welcome back to part 2 of our Davigo map making series on the channel. Today we will be covering the basic placement and function of each of the cubes, or stones, how to actually get started with your own map, and functions of the other cannons and rockets. So getting into it, first what we're going to do is come here to our project and come down here to scenes and then open up our sample scene, which you should have had from yesterday. And usually it will have a main camera here, which you're going to want to delete the camera, whatever camera is here, as we don't need it and it will actually hinder us from actually making sure that we can export everything. So, getting started with the map is you need to first have your base and all that stuff, and we will be going over balancing and all of that in the next video. But first you're going to want to come into your sample scene or your hierarchy and then come here 3D object cube. And as you can see, it's all the way over there and we want it right here. So we come up here and transform, click, and then you can just make sure it's all blue, just hit 0, 0, 0. Now we have it into the middle of our scene. We can go ahead and come up here in the hierarchy and right click to rename it, and we will call this ground. So now if we hit R, we can open up the scale tool. We can make it wider, and the more wide it is, the faster it goes. Or you can come up here in the transform, and under scale, we'll say we want it 75 by 5. Let's do 45 because we want this to go down to the bottom. And then we'll go 75. So as you can see, we now actually, let's make this one 50. No, no. 60. There we go. Now we can go down here to materials and under the level material folder, pull grid clip out, and there we go. Now to get a sense of scale and make sure that your map isn't too large, we're going to want to bring in a giant spawn. And as you can see right now, this is way too big. So let's bump this down to 65 and we'll make it 65 by 45. Actually this is still too wide, so let's just do 50. There we go. That's a lot more of a decent sized map. Well, 35, 25, 35. Yeah, we'll go 35. There we go. Now, as you can see, this is actually a lot of trial and error, but that's okay. So now we can line up our giant, pull it back a little bit, raise it up actually, and then there we go. Usually you want to have it a little bit off the map, unless your map is like a very large, then you can have it more in the middle. But we're going to put it right there, and then we're going to bring in our warrior start position, which we can then rotate around. And as you can see, now we have the giant start and the warrior start, which, as I said in the last video, is a 100% requirement for the map. Just like the other two things we're going to add, which is right now the kill zone, which is also under just prefabs, where you can find the giant and warrior spawn, and we're going to bring in map settings. Now map settings, don't worry about that right now. I will be going over that in the next video. So, going over what we're going to do next is going to be the design of the map and what you want to do with it. Now from here on out, you don't have to follow everything I do, just the basic recommendations I have. And that is definitely to have some sort of different heights in your map. It can be just flat like this, but I highly recommend having it a little bit bigger. Well, not a little bit bigger, I mean a little bit higher in certain spots. And to do that, we can Control D to duplicate this, and as you can see now we have two of them. We can scale this down, make it a lot shorter, and then we can rotate it. Let's make this smaller. And then we can bring this right over here to the corner of our map. Now I want to give this grid stone, make that bigger, push that into the ground a little bit, and then make another one by hitting Control D again. And now we have a little bit of a height difference in the map. Now you can make any of these shapes whichever shape you'd want. It does not have to be a cube like how I'm doing it. I recommend actually being creative and adding your own things that you would like to the maps. But for now, I'm going to be mainly using cubes because they are easy to work with and easy to understand. So I'm going to just add a little bit here, make it look better. It's kind of hard to make things look better with cubes, but that's okay. Now, we'll get into the placement of all your objects and stuff that the giant can mess around with. We'll go, usually I like to start with placing my trees because they're the most occlusive, I'd say. So make sure the stump is somewhat in the ground as to make it where when a giant actually pulls the tree, it doesn't like phase out of the ground for no reason. And then I can just grab this and hit Control D, and then just duplicate it all over the map. Now, do not have too many trees as it will make things a lot more difficult for you. But seeing as this is a relatively large map, I'd say that's a good amount of trees. You can always add more, and you can also resize them to add some variation, which is what I like to do. But we won't be going over that right now. So, now focusing more on the warrior is you want to find a good spawn for it, where the giant can see them and know where they are, but that the giant cannot spawn kill, as to balance the map more. Now, I usually like to put it in a place like over here towards the corner or behind just any sort of cover, really, as it makes it much easier to uh, balance later on and make sure that the giant cannot just immediately grab the warrior. Now, as to making the giant have more to do and how to actually add other features, we're going to make it where it can hit the ground and spawn rocks and all that stuff. So if you click on your whatever object you want to give this component to, I'm going to apply it to the ground and these three and I did this by holding shift and click, 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 and it selects them all. Now you come over here to the right side, the inspector, and hit add component, and then you type in impactable or IMP, and you choose the impactable component. Now this makes it where the giant can fissure by slamming its fist on the ground. It can slap the ground to spawn in the small rocks and do all that stuff. You can apply that to anything you want. It doesn't matter what it is. And that just makes it where, it actually has interesting things to do and can spawn itself more rocks. So, now I will get into rocket placement, which is something that can be a little bit tedious, but once you get the hang of it, it's fine. So you want to come over here, and usually you want to keep the rockets, most of them, in the vicinity of the giant to make it more risky to go grab rockets, but more rewarding at the same time, because that adds a lot to the map. So you can come here, and I'll place one right there, Control D, right there, Control D, another one there, Control D, and you can just keep doing that all over the map. Now you can see these two are very close to each other. So we're going to remove this one as we have two over there and we have two back here. Now I'm going to move this one a little bit closer. And I usually like to actually have one rocket spawn on the warrior as to give them a bit of help at the start. You don't have to do that, just something I like to do. Now, when it comes to cannons, I like to put them up in higher spots like this, or you could really have them anywhere. You can have one in the corner there, one in that corner, anywhere you want them. But I'm going to put mine right up here, and as you can see, it spawns in like this. You're probably going to want to lower this down a little bit so the warrior can actually step on the button. But now I can bring it here, line it up a bit, and then I can come over here, Control D, and we'll add a second one because, add a little bit more difficulty. And I'll also bring a rocket up here. Now we have all that. And as you can see, now you have most of the basics for a map. Now what you're going to want to add next is rocks for the giant to throw and, just keep itself safe with, because using only the small rocks to throw would be very boring. So now this is where I highly recommend you get uh, all that creative juice flowing, and you can come here, and let's say we have a big rock right here in front of this rocket to protect the rocket and add a little bit of cover for the warrior. Then you can bring in the bigger rock right here, and then you can, rotate that, add another one over here, take that a little bit more, and now you have some cover over there as well as rocks for the giant to throw. Then you can also come over here, say we want a little rock pile here, just come do that, rotate that a little bit, bring this over here, rotate that, and then bam, you have a pile of rocks. Now, when it comes to rocks, you do not want to have them in the ground like, at all. Or else, when you start the game, it'll just go pew, and it'll go straight up, and it's kind of odd, and it makes it, seem pretty sloppy. So just make sure that they aren't colliding with each other when they spawn in, and they also aren't in the ground. Now, they can be floating like this because whenever the game starts, it will give them gravity and they'll fall down. And usually you want to have them floating a little bit so you know it's not interacting with the ground. And now that we've gotten that, your map is starting to come together. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy or Control D, rotate that a little bit, and bring it here. We'll make that a little bit shorter. And as you can see now, we have a bit of a curve to the map, which looks kind of nice, makes it more interesting. You don't have to make all these perfect, but you can come here now. If your movement or whatever is all the way over here, I usually just hit E and just really quickly click one of those as to not turn it at all. So, and you always want to have your giant facing the front. You very rarely, if at all, want to have it facing a side or something, because then that will require the person playing as the giant to actually turn their head and completely reorient their body to, well, play the game. So now we're just gonna come over here, add some more trees. And you know what? Actually, we'll remove those. Let's get a whole different area over here with a little bit of a cliff face. So I'm gonna resize this, bring it right over here, delete that rock, and now you can see, Control D, come over here, do that, and now we got a little bit more over here, which also provides cover for the warrior. Now you can make this however big you want. I'm going to make this one a little bit smaller because I'm actually going to change this texture to the cliff. Actually, I want to make this a little bit wider. Pull it over a little bit, and there we go. So you've got that. We can now add let's see, we'll add some rockets up here. Let's bring some more trees. And then bam, let's make sure I didn't, yeah, see, look at that. I accidentally duplicated a tree and another tree, which is going to cause the same issue as spawning a rock in the ground. So now we have a whole bunch of rockets, we have cannons, we have rocks, which, speaking of rocks, I forgot to add these, which can be pulled out by the giant, giving it more rocks to throw. So, just going to add a couple of these, bring it here, and look at that. Now that you should have an idea for your basic map, you can mess around with this, do whatever you'd like with it. Just remember the 4 basic things that you need: giant spawn, a warrior start, a kill zone, and map settings. So now that I've covered all of this, the next video will be the final tutorial of what you need to do to actually export a map and test it, all that, and polish it up. That will be the next video coming out within the next day. So I will see you then. Hope you enjoyed, and see you next time. Bye bye.